Super Mario Bros. Was a massive success when it launched in 1985. It was the definitive platforming game and was instrumental in helping to make video games popular again after the infamous video game crash of 1983. Given how successful the game was, one would expect a sequel to follow, and indeed, a sequel was developed. In fact, two sequels were developed. One that for a time was released exclusively in Japan, and another which is a redesigned version of another title entirely. These two sequels are the topic for today's video. But first, some history. Following the release of Super Mario Bros. 1, Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka set to work on creating a sequel. During this time, they were also developing a version of Super Mario Bros. For a coin-operated system called the Nintendo Versus System, a system that contained harder versions of pre-existing NES titles. The team had used this system to test new, challenging level designs and found that they enjoyed them, and felt that other Mario enthusiasts would as well. In fact, some of Mario 2's levels were actually reused from this version called Versus Super Mario Bros. Takashi Tezuka had felt that players in Japan had mastered the original Super Mario Bros. And felt that he needed to develop a game that was more of a challenge. In fact, the box art for the game even states that this game is intended for super players, as the team felt it would be too challenging for newcomers. In 1986, the game was released for the Famicom Computer Disk System, an add-on for the Famicom which allowed for better graphics and sounds, and used floppy disks instead of cartridges. When the game was being evaluated by Nintendo of America to be released outside of Japan, they ultimately decided not to release the game. The company had found that the game was too similar to the original and that the difficulty would cause the game to sell poorly. These concerns arising because North America was still recovering from the 1983 video game crash. Because of this, the game would not be seen by Western audiences until 1993 with Super Mario All-Stars, where the game was renamed to Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. But North America and Europe did eventually receive Super Mario Bros. 2, but one that was much different. Enter Yume Kōjō Doki Doki Panic, or simply Doki Doki Panic, a game released in 1987 that was also developed by Nintendo as part of a deal with Fuji TV to help promote an event they were hosting that year called Yume Kōjō 87. According to what I've researched, Minoru Arakawa, the founder and first president of Nintendo of America, made the request to have Doki Doki Panic converted into a Mario sequel despite the game having nothing to do with Mario. But regardless, the conversion did happen and thus Super Mario Bros. 2 was released in 1988. For this review, I'll be discussing both games separately, so let's begin with the Lost Levels. The story of the Lost Levels is more or less the same as the first game. Bowser has kidnapped Princess Peach and Mario must rescue her once more, so nothing here has changed. In regards to gameplay, Lost Levels isn't much different from its predecessor. Mario controls exactly as he did in the last game, as well as having access to all of the same power-ups, and boss battles against Bowser once again follow the same patterns as they did before. That said, there are some new changes and additions. Two-player mode is absent from this title entirely. Instead, we now have selections titled Mario Game and Luigi Game. Selecting Luigi Game has the player take control of Luigi, who does play a bit differently. He can jump roughly twice as high as Mario can, which can allow him to reach areas Mario would otherwise have difficulty reaching by himself, and it can make certain jumps a bit more manageable. However, the trade-off for this high jump is that Luigi's traction is rather poor, meaning that when attempting to slow down, Luigi will slide quite a ways before stopping, which can lead to some rather unfortunate falls. Because of this ice-like traction, this can make some parts of the game a bit more challenging as Luigi, but his higher jump can also make other parts of the game much easier. Luigi's jump makes it possible to clear jumps Mario is unable to without some form of assistance from enemies or blocks. Once you learn how to maneuver with Luigi's traction, he can actually make it possible to breeze through some stages. As far as new items, there is only one, the Poison Mushroom. These are the equivalent of touching an enemy, so be sure to avoid these whenever possible. The most noteworthy aspect of this game is the difficulty. This game is quite a bit more challenging than its predecessor, which in of itself is not a bad thing. But I feel as though this game constantly teeters back and forth between fair challenge and unfair challenge. Some stages are actually quite fun to travel through, and I feel that they test the player in reasonable ways. But then other stages can be annoying or even frustrating. Some stages have seemingly dead ends until you reveal a hidden block to progress forward. Now, this by itself isn't a huge problem, but in the case of the hidden blocks in World 2-2, the blocks are positioned in a way that makes it somewhat hard to jump onto them as Mario, and sometimes you can overshoot the block and lose a life in the process. The World 3 Castle has a similar situation by requiring you to unveil some hidden blocks to reach the correct path, but there's almost nothing to indicate that the blocks are there to reveal. And then some jumps are stretched very far and sometimes require you to bounce off of an enemy to reach a certain location. And it only takes one mistake to cost you a life. And sometimes the enemy placement can be needlessly cluttered, making it very difficult to maneuver around them. Now keep in mind, the issues I've listed don't apply to every stage, but because of this I feel it leads to fluctuating difficulty. In the original Super Mario Bros, I felt that the level difficulty increased in a natural way, by which I mean that as you moved along, stages became naturally more challenging, but not to the point where it was punishing. In this game, you can have one stage that is relatively easy, then 2 stages afterwards that are difficult, and then maybe 2 easy stages again. It's very inconsistent, and that's how I feel with the level design as well. With this in mind, some stages can be fun to play through because they don't have an abundance of bad obstacle or enemy placement, but then other stages suffer from just that and it can make those stages tedious to play through. One change I do like to the gameplay is the continue feature. In Super Mario Bros, if you got a game over, you were sent back to the title screen unless you held the A button before pressing start. In this game, the continue option is simply there, and using it sends you back to the beginning of the world you got a game over in. Graphically, this game is improved from the first game. While Mario, Bowser, and all of the enemies in the game look the same as they did before, the environment has undergone some changes. The ground now looks like dirt instead of simply being blocks, clouds and bushes have eyes, new background details are added, and all the text now has a drop shadow, making it much easier to see and read. I like these changes as they make the Mushroom Kingdom feel a bit less barren than it did in the first game, and the music remains the same as well, so nothing has changed there. I'll cover my final thoughts later. For now, let's move on to Super Mario Bros. 2 USA. Since Super Mario Bros. 2 was originally created as Doki Doki Panic, both games share many similarities, but that being said, they also have their fair share of differences. The story of this game is that Mario dreams about a stairway that leads him to the world of Subcon, the land of dreams. A voice tells Mario that Subcon has been taken over by a tyrant named Wart, who has cast a dark spell over the land. Mario wakes up and tells Luigi, Toad, and Princess Peach about his dream, but upon entering a cave, Mario sees a stairway leading to a door which leads to Subcon, and so Mario and friends embark on a new journey to save Subcon from Wart's tyranny. This story is somewhat different from Doki Doki Panic. In this game, twins Pokey and Picky are reading a magical storybook when Wart, who is known as Mamu in this title, kidnaps the twins from within the book and into the land of Subcon, which here is known as Mu. The twins' pet monkey Rusa then leaves to get help from the twins' brother Imogen, their parents Mama and Papa, and Imogen's girlfriend Lena, who all enter the book to rescue the twins. Gameplay-wise, this game is quite a bit different from the original Super Mario Bros. And the Lost Levels. The game is still a side-scrolling platformer, but this title adds in some vertical platforming as well. Certain parts of stages now scroll up or down. This does challenge the player in some unique ways, such as having to descend an area while keeping track of what is above or below you. It's something that forces you to become more aware of your surroundings, as enemies follow the same rules and can fall on top of you from the screen above or come up from the screen below. One of the biggest changes to this game is how you deal with enemies. In the first game, you simply had to jump on an enemy and that would eliminate them. Here, jumping on them simply causes you to stand on top of them. By pressing B while standing on top of an enemy or on these blades of grass, you can lift up enemies or vegetables. Then, by pressing B again, you can throw that enemy either down a bottomless pit or into other enemies, which defeats them instantly. This change in the formula does somewhat slow down this game's pace, as lifting objects is not only used to defeat enemies and bosses, but it's also used for some puzzle solving, such as using bombs to destroy walls blocking your path. But overall, it isn't too bad, and throwing enemies into others is actually quite satisfying. In Mario 1 and Lost Levels, unless you had a Super Mushroom or a Fire Flower, if you took damage at all, you would lose a life. In this game, you actually have a life meter, which you can extend by finding magic potions which can take you into subspace. By using the potion in certain areas, you can find a Super Mushroom to increase the amount of hit points you have, and it also fully restores your health meter. In Doki Doki Panic, the player had access to 4 playable characters: Imogen, Lena, Mama, and Papa. Since Super Mario Bros. 2 was created from this title, the Mario characters were used in place of these ones. Mario replaces Imogen as the balanced character. They have no real strengths, but no real weaknesses either. Since Luigi had a higher jump in Lost Levels and Mama in this game has the same ability, Luigi replaced her in Super Mario Bros. 2, though Luigi actually jumps a bit higher than she does. Princess Peach replaced Lena, and with this, gained her ability to float in the air for a short period of time after jumping, which can be a great help during tough platforming challenges. But Peach also inherited Lena's slower run speed and weaker strength, meaning Peach lifts enemies and objects much slower than the others. And finally, Toad replaces Papa, gaining his fast running speed and great strength, which can allow him to lift enemies and objects much faster than everyone else. But the cost of this is that both of them have worse jumping ability than the others, which can make certain platforming challenges a bit more difficult. Though when I say run speed, this really only applies to Super Mario Bros. 2, which added a run button, which is something that Doki Doki Panic did not have. Instead, characters moved at a set walking speed. The run button is a nice addition, but the characters can sometimes move a bit too fast and reach maximum speed very quickly, unlike Mario 1 where Mario had to run a certain distance before he reached top speed. Because of this quicker acceleration, it can sometimes lead to some unfortunate falls during certain platforming challenges, though this is really only an issue when jumping onto smaller platforms. Quite possibly the biggest change between the two games is stage progression. In the original Doki Doki Panic, in order to beat the game you had to clear every stage with all 4 characters. For example, if you select Imogen, you would have to finish all of World 1 first before you can select a new character, and then you would have to repeat this process with the other characters. In Super Mario Bros. 2, each character shares stage progression, and you have access to the character select after each stage. There's also some other small changes between Doki Doki Panic and Super Mario Bros. 2, such as Mario 2 having higher quality music and certain objects such as vines and grass now being animated, which I think helps make Subcon feel a bit more alive in Super Mario 2. Boss fights once more return and like the first game are really nothing special. You simply throw objects at the enemy until they're defeated. Granted, some bosses can be challenging, such as Triclide because of how many fireballs it can throw at once. So while a bit more involved than the Bowser fights in Mario 1, bosses in this game are, for the most part, fairly easy. When comparing this game to Lost Levels, this game definitely has more consistent challenge and falls more in line with how Mario 1 handled difficulty. That being said, this game does have its moments where it can get frustrating, but overall it's much more manageable than the Lost Levels is. Graphically, this game is a huge step up from Mario 1 and the Lost Levels. Environments are much more varied and characters, enemies, and objects are more detailed than they had ever been up to that point. In fact, this game effectively establishes the iconic look of the Mario Bros, Princess Peach, and Toad. And despite the soundtrack being about as limited as Super Mario Bros. 1, it is still a great listen, with Koji Kondo once again having composed it. Like their predecessor, both versions of Super Mario Bros. 2 have been ported to and remade for various systems. As I mentioned earlier, the Lost Levels saw its first international release as part of Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The game is functionally the same as the Famicom version, but it now comes with a save feature and a revamped continue system. In the original Lost Levels, if you got a game over in World 4-4, you were sent all the way back to World 4-1. In this version, if you get a game over in 4-4, you will restart at 4-4, which makes this version much more forgiving. And I've already spoken about Super Mario Bros. For Super Players in the last video, so I won't get into that version here. And Super Mario 2 USA also received the same treatment of being remade for Super Mario All-Stars. Once again, it's the same game with better graphics and sounds. But then in 2001, Nintendo began to release remakes of classic Super Mario titles on the Game Boy Advance, titled the Super Mario Advance series. The first of which was Super Mario Advance, which contained a remake of Super Mario Bros. 2 and the original Mario Bros. Arcade game, something that all games in the Advance series would include. All of these games are based on their All-Stars counterparts, but do contain some differences. The visuals are the same from the All-Stars version, but are a little more washed out, and the music is also for the most part the same. Each of the playable characters and bosses now also have voices, which, while unnecessary overall, does somewhat help to give each character a little more personality, so I don't mind this addition. In addition, larger vegetables can be found that allow you to hit enemies much easier, and hearts here are more plentiful than any other version of Super Mario 2. Much like Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, the screen is crunched, but unlike that game, it isn't crunched to the point where you're taking leaps of faith or getting blindsided. And honestly, with the addition of larger vegetables and more hearts, this game is made much easier than its 8 and 16-bit counterparts. With these additions, plus the enhanced Mario Bros. Arcade game, I don't think anyone would be wrong in saying that this is the definitive version of Super Mario Bros. 2. And then finally, the international Super Mario Bros. 2 actually did get released in Japan as Super Mario USA for the Famicom in 1992. Now then, it's time for me to give my final thoughts on both of these titles, and I'll be honest, I was quite surprised by how I felt when I finished these games. Both games have their own merits, and I believe both are worth playing because they each offer their own unique challenges. But I'll be honest, I actually found that I enjoyed Lost Levels a bit more than Super Mario Bros. 2. I believe part of this may have had to do with my enjoyment of games such as Super Meat Boy and Celeste, which I was comparing this game to as I played it. While I don't find Lost Levels nearly as well designed or as consistent as either of those games in terms of challenge, I still found myself enjoying the challenges that the game had to offer. I feel that if the challenge wasn't as inconsistent as it is, the game would be much better for it. So while I enjoyed the game personally, I can't recommend it to anyone who's looking to get into the series or even into platformers in general. But if you are looking for a challenge, then by all means, give this game a try. While I'd still recommend games like Celeste and Super Meat Boy above this game, there's still enjoyment to be had. And Super Mario Bros. 2, while much different from the first game, is also a fine enough experience and one that has much more consistent challenge. While I didn't enjoy my time with this one as much as Lost Levels, I still had fun with this game and I do recommend it. With all that said, Mario still has one last adventure on the NES, so next time we meet we're taking a look at Super Mario Bros. 3. Until then, take care everyone.